He didn't want me to wear my new revealing dress to work, but I ignored his warning. But then, hello, Reddit. My name is Hannah. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a secretary in a big modeling industry. Working as a secretary has its big perks because I get some free clothes after they have been used for modeling, and I get to wear expensive dresses that I normally wouldn't be able to afford. Not only that, but I also get to work hand in hand with very famous fashionistas, especially when hosting a modeling show and all. I'm really not here to talk about my job or career. I'm here for something entirely different and serious, and I'm quite desperate for advice of some sort. My boyfriend of 7 years decided to end our relationship. I still cannot believe it, and I'm so scared. I cannot lose Francis. I mean, we've planned everything together. We have our wedding plans already in place. The only thing stopping us is that Francis wanted to pay off the mortgage on the house he had bought for us to stay in after our wedding. Everything is supposed to be brand new after our wedding, and we were going to have such perfect lives together. Well, until I went and ruined everything. Which is why I'm here. I really need your help on how to get back Francis. He's so upset with me and refuses to speak to me. He wouldn't even hear me out or allow me to apologize. Well, what happened had actually been my fault. My mistake had stemmed from a place of stupid insecurities and fears, really. I have always had very strict parents growing up, coupled with the fact that they were very good and committed Christians who seemed to think life revolved around church. I was their only child, and they loved me so much. But despite that, they were never less strict. Although one thing I had always respected them for is that they never forced their decisions on me. They expected that I knew the right thing, and I would just do what is right. It made me angry and frustrated having to live with two perfect parents and being the imperfect seed between them. My parents were very intelligent, and whenever I heard stories about their many scholarships and their relentless pursuit of academics, it made me feel stupid, as I was very bad at studying. My mom was really beautiful, and she had this flawless skin and aura without even having to use any organic products. She was often mistaken to be my younger sister or older one wherever we went together, because of how young and beautiful she was. My dad was mostly believed to be too young to have a grown daughter like me. I got tired of having to live in their shadows, and I started rebelling as a way of making their so-called perfect life become imperfect. I started doing drugs and having sex with different random guys. So far as they were willing, they didn't have to date me. I was ready to have sex anywhere. When my parents found out about my drug situation, they were heartbroken. And crazily, it pleased me so much seeing them suffer like that. I continued my wild lifestyle, and after graduating from high school, I informed them that I wasn't going to go to university. My dad had been so upset, and he threatened to cut me off if I continued on my pathway to destruction. I didn't mind, because despite knowing my dad could do what he said he would, my mom would never allow her only child out on the street. I started becoming braver and inviting guys into the house whenever they weren't around. We would have mini parties, get drunk and high, and have sex. Our neighbors told my parents about it, and when they realized I wasn't going to stop, my parents invited the police to arrest me during one of my mini parties, which I was sure a neighbor had called to tell them about again. I spent a whole 3 days in jail before I was bailed. I was so angry, and I promised to hurt them as much as they hurt me. But I knew I had to leave the house first. By the way, before I forget, one thing that never changed for me, even though I did drugs and had wild sex, was the way I dressed. My mom believed so strongly that conservative dresses were a way of pleasing God. It annoyed the hell out of me because I never got to dress the way I saw other girls did. I wanted to wear skimpy clothes and attract boys too, without having to go to them and ask if they wanted free sex. I wanted to look sexy and have boys fight over me like Gloria did, without having to do anything other than pick the one that pleased my eyes. But my parents would never allow that. One time, I even saved up all my money to get a dress I had eyed for the longest time in a mini shop. My mom found the dress when she went to my room to pick up my laundry, and she burnt it. In fact, my allowance was reduced very much after that. So I decided again that I was going to university, and my parents were happy. My dad wanted me to become an accountant like he was, and my mom just wanted me to do anything I wanted, so long as I was in university. I entered college after 2 attempts, and I got to study what I had in mind. I knew I could never become a model because of my insecurities, and also because I was quite on the chubby side. I was not that tall, slim girl with legs that could go on forever. So I decided to make do with studying something in relation to fashion so I could at least get to work with them, even if I wasn't them. It was in university. I met Zach, short for Zachary. Zach was a popular kid in school for his notorious bad boy acts, and he never was afraid of what the school might have to say about it. From what I heard, his parents had been one of the biggest donors in the school, which meant he was untouchable. I admired Zach from afar, of course. He was the typical bad boy every Miss Two Goody Shoes would like to be with. I wasn't exactly good, but I wasn't that bad either. When Zach noticed me one day in the cafeteria, I was so happy and excited. It wasn't long after that we started dating, or should I say, I started dating Zach since it was more of a one-sided thing. Zach never related with me in public. In fact, he would ignore me very much in public and then, in private, have hot sex with me. I was okay with it at that point. I was happy about his little dirty secret. Zach started complaining about the way I dressed, and he would purposely buy me sexy dresses and have me wear them to seduce him. He never allowed me to wear them, though. The day I did, and I had so much attention drawn to myself, Zach had been so angry he left an angry mark on my skin. So from then, I was careful to dress the way he wanted. I wanted to please him and make him want me, but that still didn't last long, as Zach started seeing another Miss Two Goody Shoes and ignoring me both in public and in private. I realized then that Zach just wanted to have sex with every girl he met, and that he didn't choose me because he liked or loved me. I was so hurt, but I had to move on. It was in my final year I met Francis. Francis had been a sweetheart. He helped me avoid an embarrassing situation that could have gotten a lot worse if he hadn't intervened. I had gone to eat at a local restaurant around the town just to explore, and I hadn't realized until it was time to pay that my purse had been stolen alongside my phone. The waitress started to get angry, thinking I was one of those people who usually came for free food, and despite my explanations, she wouldn't listen. Francis had coincidentally happened to be in that restaurant that day, and he paid for my lunch. I insisted on paying him back, so I had written out his number and promised to call him when I got a new phone so he could send me his account details and I could pay back. He had not argued with me, and true to my words, as soon as I got a new phone, I texted him, thanked him, and then asked for his account details, which he refused to give. He told me that the only way he could get my new number was if he agreed that I pay him, so he had gone with the flow. He had no intention of being reimbursed. We became really good friends and spoke literally every day. Francis was a good conversationalist, and so every time we had something new to talk about. I loved talking to him, and I even told him things I would not ever share with anyone else. He advised me on everything, and it was so easy to go with because he simplified complex things for me. Francis told me at one point, when I had been complaining about my looks and way of dressing, that it was the way I looked that attracted him to me. It made me happy, and I started to get really confident and comfortable with my looks. I even started styling my conservative dresses, and people's comments on them made me really happy. Francis was not in school when we met, though. He had started working as an architect, and he was building his own company bit by bit then. When Francis eventually asked me to be his girlfriend, I was already too in love with him and hadn't wanted to be too forward by confessing my feelings to him, so I, of course, jumped at the request. We started dating a month after my graduation and continued dating until now. My parents must have noted the changes in me after I met Francis, and they kept insisting I introduced him to them so they could thank him. I felt angry because it meant that I couldn't have spotted those changes on my own. I didn't feel grateful for them. I just liked being confident. I felt like I achieved that confidence and good behavior on my own. He was just encouraging me. I could have refused his encouragement and still achieved everything by myself. But when my parents kept insisting I brought him to them, I did, and they loved him so much, even till now. After graduation, I started living with Francis because I felt it was normal for us to stay together as a couple, and Francis did not complain about it. I started job hunting, and it had been pretty exhausting. It was like all the interviewers wanted was sex in return for a job, and it annoyed me. But after 3 whole years of looking fruitlessly for a job, I decided to do whatever it took to get a job. I hated relying on Francis for everything, even though he never complained once. I just disliked the fact that I was indebted to him. So when I heard about one of the largest fashion companies having a job opening for a secretary, I was determined to do whatever it took to get the job, and I did. I slept with the manager and another one of the interviewers to secure a place in the interview because they had many applicants, and they chose only 50 for the second stage of the interview. I eventually got the job without even trying. Francis had been so happy for me, not knowing what I had done just to get the job. I, of course, did not want him to find out because I knew what his thoughts were on cheating. His last girlfriend apparently had cheated on him with his best friend and eventually married him, and he had sworn that he would never have anything to do with a liar and a cheat. Both of which but they say ignorance is bliss, right? Those were my thoughts. What he didn't know couldn't hurt him, and I loved Francis too much to lose him. I started working there as the secretary, and I was happy at first. But then I started feeling so sad every time I went to work. Working around those models and good stylists made me feel less of myself. I thought working closely with them would make me happy, not until I did, and realized that being with them would please me better. I was unsatisfied with how I looked in my long knee-length skirts or dresses. I wanted to be like them at all costs. I started to accept the dresses that the models gave me as free gifts. I never wore them at first because I knew Francis would not be pleased. So I just kept them, and I only tested them whenever I was at home, and Francis was busy. I would swirl and take pictures in front of the mirror, and then delete them, because of how disgusting I looked in the pictures. I mean, truthfully, they were nice pictures, but they didn't make me look like those models with perfect pose and poise, so I was unsatisfied with them. I started taking all sorts of medications to slim down, but instead of slimming down, they did the opposite for me. I even contemplated fat reduction surgery once, but I had squashed the thought because I had no way of paying for it, and Francis would never agree to pay for something he had termed as ridiculous and unsafe. This continued for about 3 more years, until we were suddenly told that our firm had been bought by another fashion firm and that the new boss was arriving soon. It had shocked a lot of us, especially because we didn't know what to expect. We were all used to our present boss, and we didn't know exactly how we would please the new boss, so we were especially anxious. Soon the new boss arrived, and it turned out to be Zach and his wife. I was so shocked and felt really small. In fact, when I had to introduce myself, I stammered greatly, and Zach's wife yelled at me impatiently. That day after work, I contemplated quitting, but I knew I wouldn't get an opportunity to work somewhere big again because I would not be getting a letter of recommendation or anything like that. I couldn't tell Francis about it because I never told him about Zach before. He had been a part of my past I hadn't wanted to share because I thought of how low I had stooped just to please him, Zach, and I felt ashamed of myself. So I was stuck with myself for a reasoning partner. I thought back to how Zach's wife looked. She had been effortlessly beautiful. No doubt she had surgery to add or remove bits and bits of her body. I felt really envious of her, and the fact that Zach didn't choose me all those years ago made me feel even less of myself. The next day, when I had finished work, Zach had called me into his office to bring him some documents so he could go through them and get a handle on what was going on in the company, and I had no choice of rejecting because he was my boss. Zach had, instead of asking me to drop the documents and leave or brief him about it, told me to sit. He told me that he wanted to have a great working relationship with me and that he couldn't do that if I was still hung up on the past. I felt insulted, but I didn't show it, and I assured him that I was over him long ago. The next few days after that, Zach and I were stuck working together closely, and it affected me a whole lot mentally. I couldn't take the pressure of it all, and I emailed my resignation letter stating some lame excuses about why I couldn't continue to work there anymore. Zach had refused to accept my resignation letter, and he had asked that I see him. It had been a Saturday and Francis wasn't home, but I did not feel like explaining myself, and since I was quitting anyway, I decided that a little rebellion wouldn't hurt. Surprisingly, Zach showed up at my house, and when I asked him how he knew where I stayed, he told me he checked the personal information file for my address. He invited himself in like he owned the place and told me that I wasn't allowed to quit. I could have just said no and that I didn't want to work with him anymore, but I guess somehow I was still as much of a people pleaser as I was back in school, especially with Zach, because I found myself nodding and saying I would retract my resignation letter. It wasn't long after that Zach and I started sleeping together again. The first time had been me trying to prove a stupid point, really. Zach's wife barged into our office that day and demanded to see Zach, who had been in a meeting, and I told her exactly that, but she insulted me thoroughly, calling me a stuck-up nun who had no idea how hard it was to keep a man like Zach. I felt so angry and bitter, and when Zach had finished up his meeting, I went into his office, locked it so no one could come in, and offered myself as a sex worker would to Zach, who was more than willing to go with the flow. Somehow in my head, I felt that sleeping with Zach would somehow prove to his wife, who knew nothing about what I did with her husband, that no matter how beautiful she looked, she still couldn't keep a man like Zach in check. I apologized after the whole thing and made flimsy excuses that I hadn't been in my right mind, and Zach shrugged, saying that he didn't mind as he had missed me. After that one time, it was a repetition of the same act almost every day. Most times it was in his office under the pretense of work. We would have sex. Sometimes he would invite me out to a hotel and we would spend time, of course, doing stuff we shouldn't be caught dead doing. We took substances, especially when we were at the hotel, and we would have drug-induced sex. In fact, I started to get addicted to taking these substances before having sex. So, sex with Francis wasn't as enjoyable again because I couldn't take them. I gradually reduced having sex with Francis until I eventually stopped. I made different excuses of tiredness or work issues, and I was always too busy for Francis. The video that Francis somehow got his hands on had been made at the hotel we usually met one day. That day, Zach told me he wanted to make our sexual adventures more fun, and he placed my phone on the table in a way that it captured the bed and started a video, then joined me in bed, stark naked. We were high on drugs that day, as usual, and we had sex on camera. I should have deleted the video, but watching us have sex on camera while high made it more erotic for me, and I was usually horny after watching it. One day, I decided to be bold enough to wear one of the dresses I got as a gift to work. I knew from past experiences that Zach wouldn't like it, but I knew he couldn't touch me like he could back in university, and I wanted to taunt him. It worked because Zach called off a meeting with the staff immediately after he sighted me and called me to see him in his office. Everyone thought I was in trouble, and I truly was, but not the kind of trouble they thought I was in. Zach slammed me against his desk with no words, spanked me until my bottom had red marks on it, and then had sex with me. Instead of feeling harassed and embarrassed, I felt turned on by the spanking, and I continued to dress slutty to work. Francis had traveled for a month's work trip, so he hadn't seen my slutty collection of dresses. I continued to explore that world with Zach. Sometimes I went home with no panties at all because he had torn them in his hasty attempts to have sex with me. One time, I had even been so bold and done something really bad, and we had almost been caught because of my actions. We were to host a walkway show, and I knew that Zach's wife would be there. Still feeling stupid, insecure, and also insulted by what she had said the other day, I had worn no panties and a short dress and sat across Zach, so whenever I crossed my legs, his eyes flew to the exact direction I wanted them to be. I had then excused myself with the lie of using a bathroom when Zach had texted me to go into the bathroom and wait for him. It wasn't long before Zach showed up in the female bathroom and entered one of the toilets with me, and we did our usual. We had nearly been caught when a woman, who happened to be a friend of Zach's wife, had come into the bathroom and had thought it was empty when she tried opening the door. I quickly stepped out, leaving Zach in, and told the woman to use another toilet because I had messed that one up pretty badly. She had looked at me weirdly before moving to another place and eventually leaving the bathroom. Zach's wife had looked at me disgustingly when I came back to sit, and I had been scared she knew what I had just done with her husband. I expected her to explode and scream at me, but none of that happened until the end of the show and even after the show. Zach and I continued our wild affair, and I felt life was good. I had a stable relationship and also a dirty little secret. It had been exhilarating, and although I felt guilty because I was cheating on Francis, somehow I just couldn't get myself to stop having an affair with Zach. He made me feel sexy and like I had an upper hand over him with sex. Francis never made me doubt my sexuality. In fact, there was not a time that I seduced Francis that he wasn't eager to have sex with me. But somehow, I guess I just needed that validation that I was just too sexy to be resisted by Zach himself. Funny thing is, even though I slept around with Zach, I was never in love with him. We both knew we were just messing around and that we couldn't have anything different because our partners individually were too precious to us to lose over something as fleeting as wild sex. But that still didn't stop us from having sex anywhere so far as it had a door and a little privacy. I walked around half high and half horny most of the time because almost every time before we had sex, we usually took some drugs to make things more exciting for us. One time, Zach had told me during our numerous sexual activities that his wife wouldn't take anything that isn't healthy, particularly drugs, and that was what made sex with her boring. It pleased me because I felt somehow Zach was regretting not continuing our relationship. When Francis came back from his trip, it had been a weekend, so I couldn't make excuses of work to go out, and I had no choice but to stay in with Francis. Zach had texted me several times telling me he missed me, and had even sent me a picture of a short, crazy dress that I should wear to work on Monday to seduce him. Later that evening, Francis and I had sex. It had been long since we did, and I didn't want him suspecting anything, so I went along with it. But just to give myself some satisfaction while having sex with Francis, I was thinking back to the video I made with Zach. While lost in thought, I must have moaned about Zach's name because Francis immediately withdrew from me and had gone to take a shower, leaving me hanging. I had been so upset, and when I asked him why he stopped halfway, he had asked why I thought it was cool to mention my boss's name during sex. I was so shocked, and I had quickly lied that my boss had been giving me a hard time, and I must have been so stressed during the week that his name must have popped into my mind. Francis didn't say anything about it after that, but he started behaving really odd. He found out about my new collection of clothes, and he had asked why I decided to wear something like that, but I had been so defensive and had ended up shouting at him. I had eventually apologized and lied that I only had them as gifts, and I couldn't throw them away, so I just kept them there. Francis didn't say anything about it again, and I felt that he was satisfied with my response. To please him, I started wearing my conservative dresses again, and although Zach wasn't pleased, he didn't have much of a choice. We still got to have sex as much as we wanted, but mostly in the office. Since Francis was back, I didn't want to ruin things between us by going weekends to a hotel with Zach like I did when he traveled. Eventually, I got tired of having to dress in those clothes. They felt too thick and too stuffy for me. I wanted to go back to wearing my skimpy outfits. So I decided to damn all the consequences, and I went personally to the mall to get myself a new dress. The dress was mid-thigh, and it had just one short sleeve which ended at my elbow, and the other hand was sleeveless. The chest area had like a rope thing that you would knot together, but it was see-through so you could see the breast of the person wearing it except the nipple area, which was covered with the material of the dress. I had bought it as expensive as it was, and my savings took a really hard blow because of it, even though I didn't mind at all. I had decided that I just wanted to wear my dress and look good. When I had worn the dress that morning, it had fit perfectly, like it had been made just for me. But Francis's expression when he saw the dress had been anger. He had asked if that was what I decided to wear to work, and I had confirmed it as yes, and he had insisted that I go back in and change. I had refused to, despite all his warnings, and went to work in my new gown anyway. but what had happened the next 30 minutes made me regret the decision I made that morning. We had been having a meeting when Francis barged in demanding to see the boss. I started to panic, but Zach had allowed him, which was a mistake on his part because he didn't know who my boyfriend was. I have only ever spoken about him a few times. I tried to smooth over the whole situation, but Francis would have none of it, and he exposed my boss and me, revealing our dirty secret in front of the whole staff. He shouted in front of everyone that he knew it was because of my affair with my boss that I dressed slutty every day to work now. I had been so shocked he found out, and I tried denying it, but he just brought out his phone and played a video for me, which left me stone cold. It had been a sex video that my boss and I had made in a drug-induced state. We had just been messing around and I'd actually forgotten about it until that moment when Francis showed me. He must have gotten it from my phone when I was careless with it or something. I had never been as frightened as I was when Francis told me he had paid a moving truck to take my stuff out of his place. I had gone on my knees to plead with him, but he wouldn't hear anything from me. But the crazy thing is, I'm not even bothered about the whole embarrassment, even though it had been in front of the whole staff. All I wanted at that moment was just to get Francis to forgive me, and I went on my knees to plead for his forgiveness. But he told me clearly that he wanted nothing to do with me. I cannot have that. I love Francis, and I cannot afford to just lose him like that. I'm so doomed now. Please help me. How do I get Francis to forgive me? I'll do absolutely anything to get him to just forgive me. Please, guys, what do I do? Update. Hello, Reddits. To say I'm devastated would not successfully and exactly comprehend how I feel at the moment. I feel so ashamed and stupid right now. And the fact that it took your harsh words and insultingly composed statements to see what a fool I was hurts more. I hate myself right now. I hate everything about myself. I just cannot still fully comprehend how I just lost everything my life entails within the twinkle of an eye. I lost my job and also Francis on the same day. Apparently, someone had hinted to Zach's wife about what was going on in the office, and she had arrived shortly after Francis had left and had fired me on the spot. And I also found out on the same day that Zach's wife was the actual owner of the company, not Zach, as his own parents had cut him off because of his unruly behavior. So he had married his wife because of her money. So now he's in the middle of a very big divorce where he would lose everything he ever had or has. Our affair news particularly made gossip in the fashion world, and I was ridiculed and blamed for everything that happened. I don't even feel moved by it because the only person I would rather not blame hates me so much now. I cannot believe I ruined my own life. Everything was perfect between Francis and me, and I just ended up ruining everything. I feel so dirty and ashamed of myself. I deserve to probably rot in the deepest part of hell for what I did to Francis. Well, maybe I'm already in hell right now because this surely doesn't feel like heaven. True to Francis's words, my loads were moved into a moving truck waiting for me outside when I got home. I tried so hard, begged, and cried for Francis to open the door and listen to my pleas, but he wouldn't even answer me. My parents, after hearing the whole thing, also cut me off totally. They now believe that they had no child in all their years of marriage. Who would blame them? I had always been their imperfect product, and I continued to prove that even now. Staring at the walls all day long, having nothing to do but recount all of the stupid things I did is my daily life routine now. Even my dreams are haunted by the life I could have had if I had not so stupidly thrown it away. It hurts really, really badly having no one to talk to. The one person I did have, I took him for granted and threw everything we had going for us away. It hurts. So much. How am I going to survive with all of these pains that seem to shred my heart into pieces and then build it all again just to go through the same process over and over again? I'm not meant to survive it though, am I? It's my punishment. My guilt. My sin that I will forever pay for. Update. Hello Reddits, it's me again. Yes, I know you guys probably don't want to hear from me again, but then again, this is the only place I could pour out my heart even though you guys judge me. This is my last post, so you don't have to worry too much about hearing from me again. I'm so lonely and sad, And now I even have an eating disorder. Funny, right? All the times I had actually prayed to get slimmer using different barbaric things, now that I'm not even trying, I'm getting so slim it's not healthy because I can't even eat without throwing up. I guess it's one of my numerous punishments for the things I did to hurt Francis. Sad, really. How I ended up losing the only person I should have guarded jealously with all of my heart. I should have been a good girlfriend and lover. I should never have been unsatisfied and greedy. The point I thought I was even proving ended up ruining my life. I wish for just one thing right now, so desperately. In fact, I wish that Francis would forgive me, even if it's just a 10% forgiveness. Maybe that would reduce the weight load of pains I carry around these days. But I cannot even delude myself to think he would ever forgive me. If I were in his shoes, I would never forgive myself. I would forever have to live with constant pain as a reminder of what I did. I still wish I did everything differently. Maybe now I would still have a job and also a partner that loves me very much, despite my insecurities. But it's too late now, isn't it? I'm stuck in this hell of my own making with no escape. None at all. I sure hope you guys, regardless of how much you hate me, don't attempt repeating the same mistakes I made, because I could tell you for free that it sure as hell isn't nice, the hellhole I'm in. Thanks and goodbye.